Good morning and welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions, brought to you by the Labyrinth Society and with your host, Christiana Brinton. Today I have as my guest author, artist, and multi-certified transpersonal therapist, Toby Evans, another of the founding members of the Labyrinth Society and the first Energy Keeper's Chair. If you are joining us on this GoToMeeting session, please mute your sound by clicking on the microphone icon in the upper left of the GoToMeeting control panel that will appear on your computer screen once you log in. If you call in by phone, you will not see this. You can unmute yourselves and ask questions during the Q&A session at the end of the interview. Find the GoToMeeting invitation posted on the TLS Facebook page, the Facebook Global Group, and on the TLS website under Media. This episode I've entitled Using Labyrinths as Fifth Dimensional Self-Towers, A Healer's Calling. My guest, Toby Evans, installed a large classical seven-circuit labyrinth in the Prairie Lands of Missouri in 1995 and proceeded to work with the energy in ways she never imagined when the idea came to her. She is an author, artist, singer, radio talk show, and podcast host, and steward of this beautiful labyrinth, the Prairie Labyrinth in Sibley, Missouri. Greetings, Toby. Welcome to Many Paths, Many Visions. Thank you for joining me today.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, so I am so excited about this topic, and I've had other people on Facebook say how excited they are that you're going to be on this show. So let's just jump right in. On your website, the website is sagebrushexchange.com. You call labyrinths, quote, 5D, capital D, self-towers, unquote. And in your gathering workshop title, the word portals is used to describe labyrinths. So I'm guessing that the meanings are similar, but if you can explain and tell listeners what in your experience and your understanding gives you reason to describe labyrinths in this way.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, that phrase, 5D self-towers, is obviously a play on the word and a contrast to all of the 5G cell towers going up all over. Mm-hmm. And when I think of the labyrinth movement in general, especially when we've got a span of time like we do, 20 years to look back at it, we didn't even have anything called cell towers that were going on 20 years ago. And yet we think of them now as common day, and it is communication. Okay, so there's these communication towers taking over, and in many ways, I'll use that phrase, it can take over our lives because there is this, this synthetic thing about it that is keeping us all separate, even though the idea of it is to link us all together. So there is a balancing act we are all in process of finding within ourselves. How do we maintain our own sovereign selves and stay connected to a bigger process than being swept up in that whole synthetic movement and inorganic? So we're moving into this time where labyrinths are really crucial. And I always saw labyrinths this way, but I didn't have those words 5D and 5D. I'm talking about fifth dimensional, self, S-E-L-F, but capital S. So it really is returning us back to our higher wisdom. And without the cell towers that we think we need that for connection. When you think of the fifth dimension or the descriptions that are used to even, talk about a fifth dimensional awareness, that is a level of consciousness and it vibrates at a certain rate. And it's different than the 3D world that we're all existing in and we know the tenets of the 3D. And part of that 3D is polarity, and it's part of that good versus evil and keeping us all kind of against each other. And there's definitely a sense of separation. And we're learning how to come into 5D awareness, which 5D awareness really is unity consciousness. It's coming together. It's understanding at a deeper level that we really are all one, and how to be in that interconnected mindset that's different than what we're seeing when we're being battered by what's happening out there in the world. So walking a labyrinth is a way for each of us to come back into our own center. It's walking and reconnecting not only with ourselves, because we've got to do that first, but then it's reconnecting to the higher self. And that is really where that whole, the most nurturing, nourishing piece is going to come from. That's bringing us through this. So I don't think it's any accident that the labyrinth movement, the modern labyrinth movement, came into being in, let's say, the later 80s or maybe even early 80s for those beginning pioneers. And it spread very quietly, kind of like cell towers. You know, it has spread, and I really think of labyrinths as cell towers that are now all over the world. So you use the word portals, that I'm putting that in as a word in my description of the session that I'm doing at Loyola. And I do see these as portals. The portals, first of all, it reminds us that we, the ones who are the portals. You know, we are the portals ourselves. And then we're combining our energy with the portal of the labyrinth. So if you look up the word portal, you know, it's described as a doorway or a gateway or an access point into an entrance of something. And in this case, I'm saying it's an entrance into that reconnection with that higher vibration that's always there. It's always pulsating. It's always available, but we don't always connect to it. But walking a labyrinth is a natural way that just happens. And so I don't know if that explained it all, but, you know, it gives you a sense of where I'm coming from.
Yes, I never, you know, you were talking about the 1980s. That was probably around the time of the Harmonic Convergence, right? You know,
Absolutely.
that whole time, that was this shift.
Yes.
It was that shift, and this came
Yes.
out of that. And, but
Yes.
I never made the connection with the cell towers, which is brilliant. Yes, that makes so much sense. That that labyrinths are kind of, you know, helping to nullify or neutralize, that's a better word, neutralize the effects of these cell towers all over the world. That's fascinating. Great. Wonderful. So let's talk about your Prairie Labyrinth. It's a 7-circuit classical Cretan design with an extra large ceremonial center and poles. The poles with clay figures, which are chakra angels, attached. So it's marking where one chakra starts and the other one ends as you weave back and around and around. So you describe on your website how you first used the traditional chakra / circuit lineup, which is 3, 2, 1, 4, 7, 6, 5, which is the circuits are the paths, and when you go in, it's based on where you enter the labyrinth. On the third circuit equals the third chakra, etc. But then you decided to change this in order to follow the chakras up the spine. So why did you decide to change that, and explain that?
So when I first was introduced to the idea, the chakra concept, it was in the way many of us were introduced to it at that time, through Sig Longren's book. So Sig was, I believe, the first individual to make that connection, to say we've got 7 paths in the 7-circuit labyrinth, and it's a natural alignment that can happen with the chakras. And he goes into explaining it beautifully, how you're entering at the solar plexus and what that means. And by the time you get to, in this case, it would be the 5th path, the throat chakra, going into the center. So I love the concept. My inspiration of doing the poles and doing it's also wind chimes. So I have wind chimes on those posts besides the chakra angels. And a lot of that was inspired by my introduction to the labyrinth, which was at Las Cruces, New Mexico in 1994 through an American Dowsing conference. So when the presenter, which at that time was John Wayne Blassingame, he set up a portable labyrinth that was using PVC pipe and running clothesline through it, and it was on the ground. But at each one of the turns, he would erect these pipes going up into the air, and he had wind chimes on it. And I loved this concept of the musical quality of the sound vibration that was coming from it. So I decided I'm doing that. I'm going to put poles. They're made out of Osage orange, which is very common to this area in Missouri. So I have hedge wood, that's another name for the Osage, and put at each one of those terms, and then it just kind of kept evolving. I put the wind chimes on the post. I had angels that I eventually made out of clay representing each one of those chakras. So it wasn't until 1998, so that was 3 years after I had already established my labyrinth and had it up in this configuration, that I began to hear, and it was through Alex Champion, and Alex was in contact with a woman named Nisha Roman, who was a labyrinth person, artist, a dowser, and she received in her own meditation that the configuration we were using to move through the labyrinth in that way, if we were correlating it to chakras, was not the most conducive for massive numbers of people that would be going through it as far as their own healing process. So Alex was very indifferent about it. He presented this to me and he just said, color them side by side. Color one the way we have it, and then color one the way she's suggesting, following the chakras, and see which one energetically speaks to you. Well, I didn't want this new configuration to speak to me. I had put a lot of effort into arranging this the way I had it. So and I'm an artist, so I could have done a nice job in coloring this in. I didn't. I just sloppily, took crayons actually and scribbled the new design next to my nice, professional looking one that I had the other way. So when you think about the original way, you saw the rainbow from the outside or overview. You saw the red on the outside. It went red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. You saw that, and I consider that the rainbow labyrinth pattern. So I'm looking at that going, I don't want to like this, the new one. And when I looked at it energetically, my feeling was, oh my God, I have to change this. And why I was saying it is because putting the yellow on the outside is where it ends up when you're following the rainbow rather than looking at the rainbow from inside. It opened it up. It opened the energy up. And I could see up to that point, the configuration we were using, in my opinion, was perfect for the time because it was bringing us all within. And that's what happens when you have a red on the outside. It's holding you in this container. It's bringing you within that deep part to do your inner work. But I felt like at this time in 98, we hit a point where it was no longer okay to be closet metaphysicians and healers and quietly doing your stuff that in the mainstream, you pretended you weren't doing anything weird because we were still thinking of it as this is kind of weird. And now it was time for us to take what we were learning and bring it to the world. It was time for exposure. It was time to let it out. So when I really saw that, I changed my entire labyrinth to this configuration. And again, there was a begrudging part of me doing that. But when I finished and I was ready to walk it in this new way, I heard a distinct inner voice that said, no, you are not to be in the labyrinth for the next 3 days. So it was settling in this new energetic. And I had to stay out completely. And when I went back in for the first time, it was startling the difference. And the way it hit me, first of all, I was so used to entering the labyrinth at the solar plexus and then gradually working down to the root by that second and third path, that being hit by the root chakra energy walking in was very confronting. it almost backed me up, like, I don't know if I even want to go in here. Okay, I'm not ready for this. But as I kept moving through it, I could see, okay, something is shifting. It's working all the way through. And I can see the wisdom of this design in hindsight, of course, but I can see working with large numbers of people, going through and having their own chakra experience. It is clearing energy, and it's starting from that root chakra, working it all the way up to the crown, which means then you enter the center of the labyrinth, or the goal area. You're entering it at your crown chakra, which is that entrance point. Again, we're back to portal. It is that entrance point into the higher awareness of your own higher self, where you are then in that deepest communion with that inspiration that's coming. You have totally unblocked it. Instead of the jumping around effect we were getting when we were doing solar plexus, sacral, root, heart, crown, third eye, throat. You know, it was a big difference. It just smoothed everything out. So I was led, because of that, to create the Chakra Labyrinth cards to really help people cue them as they walk the paths. They could carry the cards, and they'd choose a card at each path, asking, what is it at the root chakra I am most needing to be aware of or identify in the releasing process? So all the way going in, you were releasing. Being in the center, you were receiving. Walking back out, you were doing that renewal, bringing that inspiration or that new vibrational frequency that you attained back into your daily life, where you could grow corn with it. You know, so it was like, okay, let me apply this, instead of now let me walk out and go back to my job and pretend I'm just like everybody else. You know, it's like, we're here to raise the vibration. You know, we've got to start doing it more openly. You know, so that was the whole connection with the chakras and why I've shifted it and maintained it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture, the aerial picture of it,
Yes.
that I have found on your website. And so what was the date exactly when you changed this? When you changed the configuration?
We changed it because we were doing a community event that was around the Gandhi King season of nonviolence. And that is a period of how many days that went from the death of Gandhi to the death of Martin Luther King. And it was at the end of that, which would have put it into April. So it was April of 1998 is when I did all of the switching of that. So it was actually before we formed the Labyrinth Society that I had already made that knowing, I've got to do this. I've got to switch it. It's not going to be popular. It's not going to be, because everybody was using the rainbow, you know, design. And it was like, I can't do it like this anymore. I've got to bring it into alignment with our energy bodies. You know, so, and I think that contributed to what was going on that we will get into, which is the earthbound-spirits.
Yeah, and you said, and this is interesting that this happened for you then. Lauren brought the chart, you know, and was emboldened, you know, just, you know, enfevered with this desire to bring the chart labyrinth back and use that in religious settings as a means of contemplation and prayer and thinking. And it all sort of happened at that time. So it was really that labyrinth, that portal, that 5D energy saying, it's time, people, step up. You know, it's time. Really interesting. Really interesting. So on your Empire Radio show podcast, you talk about what occurred once the Prairie Labyrinth was finished, and then you changed, and that all of a sudden earthbound souls started hanging around the labyrinth. And you also mentioned on the podcast that you are clairaudient, and you heard these voices. So is this the way the souls made themselves known to you, or are you also clairvoyant?
I don't really feel like I'm clairvoyant in the sense that I think of others who really are. They see things. They can definitely see it. For me, I would say I'm clairaudient and I'm claircognizant, which means I am getting downloads that come into my mind. So it's running through my, what you think of your left brain. It's running through my mind, but it's so bizarre. It's like full conversations or it's full whatever. So I'm actually hearing it in my, most of the time, left ear. But it almost sounds like you're talking to yourself. It's that kind of hearing, this dialogue inside. So yes, that was the beginning way, but I can't say that that's how I became aware of the earthbound souls, because it was the individuals, regular people coming to walk the labyrinth, using the cards, using the chakra idea, thinking they're coming and they're going to do a walking meditation. They're just going to go in there and get centered the way everybody uses a labyrinth. And it was in those early days, those individuals coming out who would come up to me and say, okay, I have to share this with you. And they would launch into all different variations of the one woman I remember very distinctly came out and said, my son died in a motorcycle accident 3 months ago. I haven't been able to, get on with my life. He was in there, he talked to me, and I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty incredible. And then a few weeks later, another person would come out and say, my grandpa died and I could smell the tobacco, and he sat down with me in the center and he told me all of this stuff. So it kept happening, that I was, and even when it was happening, I was not part of this. I was not hearing it. I was not seeing it. I was just kind of in awe that they were willing to share it. But I was also, my conclusion was, wow, the labyrinth obviously is some kind of a portal that the veil is thinner. And it's allowing for that connection to be made, because we are entering at that crown chakra, opening ourselves up to whatever that information is. And we can be better recipients of that. We're taking in that information. So I looked at it as simply the veil is thinner, it is a portal, and loved ones can communicate easier with others who are still here or those who have gone on. I was not thinking at all in terms that any of these individuals that were having these experiences, I wasn't thinking in terms there's an earthbound spirit here. That term was not in my vocabulary. It was not in my awareness. So that gradually started happening because of all of the people telling me of their loved ones. I think the first time it made a shift was a man who came and he called to make an appointment, and he was a chiropractor. And he told me that he said, actually, I attempted to call you a year ago, and I wanted to come to the labyrinth with my best friend, and we were going to make a day of it and walk the labyrinth and see what this was about. And he said, and sadly, I can't do that because my best friend committed suicide. And he said, and I'm still reeling, but I keep getting that I'm still supposed to come to the labyrinth and do this without him. So I had already been having these experiences with other people sharing that with me. So I thought, well, that might be a good thing for you, because who knows, maybe he'll talk to you when you're in there. Maybe you'll get some comfort. So I didn't insert myself into it at all. I just let him walk out and go into the labyrinth and thinking, okay, he's going to come back and he's going to tell me whatever experience he had with this. And instead, I walk in the house and immediately that voice turns on in my head, and it's obviously his friend. And he is saying to me, when he comes out, I want you to do something. I want you to sing this song to him. And it was a song that I had recently written, one of the only songs that I've ever written that has the chorus in Spanish. And I don't speak Spanish, so this was a real struggle even getting the song down. And he kept insisting, you have to sing this for him. And I was, most of the time, the guy was out there walking. I'm in an argument with this spirit saying, I don't do that. I don't sing songs for people when they walk out of the labyrinth. What are you talking about? And he said, just do this. Just do this for me. And when he came all the way out of the labyrinth and said, well, that was nice, but I didn't really feel him. And I had to say, yeah, you didn't feel him because he was with me, bugging me the whole time. So I ended up singing the song for him. And when I finished, fumbling through the Spanish part of it, especially, the guy started laughing, and he said, my best friend was Mexican, and he was the lead singer of a band. And of course he would want you to have this song sung to me. So the chorus in English says, the all of who you are holds the space for you to be. The face that you're lost looking for looks back through everything you see. The all of who you are is the you long to be. You came here from afar to ground the stars through your own humanity. The all of who you are creates the dance that sets you free. How can you be and how can you lose the ones you love? When you just let go, they return, to the endless flow that moves through you eternally. So it was after he left, I then felt that spirit say, and now I can leave. Take me into the labyrinth. So I walked the labyrinth with him thinking, okay, this was all really weird, but it had a level of confirmation to it because of what he told me. And I could feel him go. I could feel him leave by the time I got to the center. So I would say that was one of my first experiences thinking, what is going on here? That they are trying to, and then I reflected back with the other individuals who were telling me about their loved ones coming. And in all those cases, it seemed they needed to impart either a message or a feeling that they were okay or support for their loved one before they could go. And I began to realize there's something with the labyrinth itself. I think of it as the configuration, that the paths, meaning not the way I have it set up in the chakra configuration. I'm talking about the fact that all labyrinths have that. We're spinning clockwise, now we're spinning counterclockwise. That kind of counter rotation that continues to happen all the way through a labyrinth. And there's something with that later, many years later, I read something to the effect that when we're changing dimensions, you do it through 90-degree turns. So I thought, well, we're doing that all the way through a labyrinth. You're turning back and forth and back and forth. So there was something that's occurring with an earthbound soul that is coming in when they're asking for assistance. For one thing, my perception is, I'm going to go back to that analogy of the self towers. Think of these towers that are now all over the world, okay? And think of them as towers of light. They're beacons of light that are shining out. And it is pulling into it like moths to a flame, especially those souls who are stuck for whatever reason. And the stuckness comes from their own longings that are holding them here, whether that longing is motivated by fear or it's motivated by love. And it's both, both happen, where it might be a loved one can't move on because they are so worried about those who are left, or they're feeling like I can't leave them, I've got to watch over them. So usually it is motivated by a higher vibration rather than I'm just scared to death. Although there are those who aren't going across because of whatever religious upbringing they had, of the heaven-hell concept. They're so afraid they're going to be punished, or they might be here because they, were murdered and they want revenge, or they want their killer found. It could be any host of ideas, but whatever it is, it's holding them at a lower vibration. It's holding them at a vibration that is more aligned with 3D. So they're right there at that lower astral, instead of moving to the higher astral, where they are in a higher dimension, where they're able to break free of that into that fourth dimension, into the fifth dimension. And my realization was, when we walk a labyrinth, they are moving with our energy, first of all. That's, why it works. They are connected to us because they're aware of us. And especially it's effective if it is a loved one. In other words, if a person comes knowing my dad never crossed over when he died, and I feel him around me and I don't know what to do with it, which has happened many times, And I will create that space for them to say, go into the labyrinth at each one of those chakra posts. They either, a lot of times, they are using the cards. They'll say, all right, I want to know what issue it is that's holding you here, Dad. And they'll read each one of those going in. So by the time they get to the center, they are in a place where also the soul is in a place of going, I now understand I'm holding you back by not crossing over. And when they do cross over, if they can have the understanding, it doesn't mean you have no longer any connection with those who are on earth. It means now you're seeing the whole setup, and in a way, you're seeing your life review from a bigger perspective that allows you now to be a real asset or the guardian angel they want to be for their loved one. It gives them that place because they're no longer bound by the lower vibration, which can help the remaining loved ones rise up in their own acceptance and what was this all about. It helps us all see the bigger picture. So it's been very profound for me to have the experiences with other people, and the souls themselves, I think, have been the greatest teachers for me, helping me understand what's going on with them so that I can help them. And the other amazing thing that has happened from it is I do not need to physically walk my labyrinth in order to assist them. I found that finger walking any labyrinth, and it does not need to be the Seventh Circuit or the chakra aligned labyrinth for this to work. It can be any style, the Santa Rosa, the Chart, or the Baltic Wheel. It doesn't matter. It is something with that spinning, again, clockwise, counterclockwise, that's allowing the soul to start in training with our energy, whether we're finger tracing that or we are physically moving it. They start in training to a higher vibration. And by the time you are into the center, they are then aware of what they are not aware of while they are here earthbound. They are not aware of that higher fifth dimensional, and I'll actually say sixth dimensional or sixth density self, which is their own higher self. That's the part that is disconnected. So when that connection happens, it's this amazing rejoining where the word that comes to me all the time whenever I'm participating in this, I always feel like the energy of the soul before they leave is nervous, anxious. They don't quite believe really what I'm saying. Yes, you can connect with your higher self, and then you're going to be able to go across easily. When that happens, my sense of it is they melt. You know, that's the word that always comes to me. There's a melting, and the melting has to do with their resistance. So it's almost like somebody that sees the most beautiful thing or sees the loved one and is so emotionally opened up, broken open. They break down and they start sobbing. But I see the higher self as two components, a male and a female, poles that are, so I'll say light bodies, light figures, angels, whatever word feels more comfortable. But it completely embraces them. It enfolds them, and then it morphs into more that looks like sacred geometry. So it looks like a star tetrahedron to me, that the male goes into the upward pyramid, the female goes into the downward pyramid, and that becomes like the light ship that just goes through the portal. So I've heard the portal described this way by others, and I think it's a good analogy because we all know it. And that is when you go to the bank and you put your money into one of those canisters and it goes whoosh all the way up through the tunnel. That's what it's like watching them leave. It's like they just go whoosh right through the center of the labyrinth. And again, it works if you're finger tracing a pattern, if you're literally walking a labyrinth, it doesn't matter. It's your intent that's creating that possibility and holding the vibration for them. So in the subtitle of the book that I just wrote, the title is Dead But Not Gone, but the subtitle is, Are You Part of the Soul Bridge to Guide Them Home? And I'm asking that question, and especially that question is going out to labyrinth people, because you're the ones in the choir. You're already in the choir. You're already singing. And all of us can be part of this soul bridge. And that's what it is. It just means we're being willing to have our intent and use our energy to help and train those souls to move to that higher vibration where they are at the top of the self tower, that they can see beyond the blockages that have been holding them down in this lower vibration, and they can move freely where they need to go. And I believe it's one of the biggest services that we can be doing on the planet right now at this crucial time in helping raise the vibration.
Wow. Lots of questions, lots of things. So first of all, great, amazing. First of all, the song, what you, said, what you, the Spanish part was absolutely beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful, and must have been a real tongue twister for someone who doesn't speak Spanish to say that in translation, because those are concepts are not, you're not saying, hi, I'm going to the store, I need money. This is, wow, that must have been something to hear you sing that and to sing that in Spanish and learn to sing that in Spanish. The other thing is that this reminds me of the shamanic practice of raising the column of light and to help earthbound souls ascend. So that is what you're doing, this shamanic practice of raising this column of light. The column of light is going up through the center, from the center, because we also, if you work with labyrinths, you understand that time is layered, not linear. And so there's this column of light. So this is what you're talking about. I think that.
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And in the
we've lost you.
Shamanic use in the shamanic practice, and even in the Inca medicine wheel training, there is a section where it is psychopomp work. And so psycho and pomp are from the Greek word, and it means guide of souls. So that you're guiding them to that opening, or to that portal. And because labyrinths are natural portals, it's a no-brainer, walk them to the center, and there's the opening. It's there, so it's almost like we all have, all over the world now, we have these transportation centers already built. So you could think of us as all little airports with these self towers, that are everywhere, all over the earth. And yet at the same time, how many people make the journey to the center? And it's like driving to the airport. We go to the airport, we are seeing the cell tower, but we don't do anything with it. We sit in the middle, and the part we're doing with it for ourselves is we receive the inspiration. We plug into that tower so that we are receiving that higher vibration and aligning ourselves back into that flow. So I have used the phrase that you may think that you walk a labyrinth to find your balance within the world, because especially as the way the world feels to all of us right now, that in the stillness, you really allow the world to find its balance within the self, the large self. So that's what we're doing, walking it, when we're doing it for us. But it is this bigger thing that's taking place when we're willing to assist other souls. It's like we're using the airport for what it's intended for, is to help off planet, off vibration, moving past that linear thing into the layers. And I remember a person in the very first year when I created Prairie Labyrinth, somebody who was a sensitive, actually, I think that person who came was blind. And he was very amazing because he was feeling all kinds of things because he wasn't using his physical eyes. But he was able to walk the labyrinth without banging into the grasses at all, which is quite amazing. And he was doing it all by feel. But he made the remark, he said, I know you told us this is a left-handed labyrinth, meaning the very first path swings to the left. And I did that through dowsing to determine that. And he said, but you have a right-handed labyrinth here too. And I said, oh, well, at one point I was even thinking, do I need to create a right-handed labyrinth out here in the field also? And he said, no, you already have it. He said, it's above it. So that part put a different concept into my head. And since then, I even go further to say, I have the labyrinth in the middle world, which is the Prairie Labyrinth that everybody comes and walks. But there's a labyrinth in the upper world above it, and there's a labyrinth in the lower world below it. And all of those are working all in harmony with each other. And that is part of that portal system that we don't see, that is like scaffolding, or my limited way of talking about it, that I was trying to understand it with my own head. So I said, this is like gerbil tunnels, that all of these tunnels are clicked together, and it's all above the labyrinth, and it goes on endlessly. And they're really plasma tubes that are all connected. And I feel like this grid work has been in work for a long time. And again, back to the modern labyrinth revival, I feel like it has been since this labyrinth revival took place, since the beginnings of the 80s into all what we're doing, is there's more and more gerbil tunnels that are getting connected, more and more plasma tubes, because it is connecting every one of our labyrinths together from a bigger grid position. If you looked at nodes that were showing up from an overview of the whole Earth, these are light points that are all coming up as these towers. And now we've got a grid system in place above it that is carrying that out, allowing for exodus off the planet. So it's like the airports are all up and running, and we just all it needs is us. We're the ingredient that's missing here. That ingredient that says, yes, I'm willing to be part of this bridge. Yes, I will agree to using my energy to walking into the center of my own labyrinth, or finger tracing, or walking any other ones that I go and visit, or I'm building it with the intent that as I lay down a labyrinth, I am welcoming in any earthbound souls that need to leave. So by us giving permission in that way and having it be our intent, it's like we now have an airport that's open for business. Not just that you get to sit and hang out at the airport, but you get to actually watch planes leave, and that has been a big change that's been in my awareness only since last year. Since Earth Day of last year, I feel like that was the first time I got the inner directive that the portals are now open and are to remain open all over the world. Where before that, I was doing what everybody else was doing who has consciousness about this. I walked the labyrinth in and I walked the labyrinth out, meaning my intent in walking out was I'm closing the portal because, of that whole consciousness. Well, I don't want anything negative to come in. I'm going to just keep that doorway blocked. And they're telling me, kind of laughing at me going, it doesn't need to be shut anymore, ever. You're opening up patterns, or you're opening up these portals. Leave them open because it's now connected in a bigger grid system than you can even imagine. That's above this and below this, that is allowing for this recalibration to take place. So I also talk about labyrinths as being recalibration stations. I think that's part of these towers, that they're recalibrating all of our energy who are coming with a normal walk in mind. I'm stressed about something, or I just, I'm worried about something. So you're going in and you're getting recalibrated. But then it's also just having that mindset of willingness. If there's anyone else that's hanging around me or has been drawn to this particular node that is lighting up, that I am activating by my own walking, then please go across. You don't even have to have, awareness of anything they're saying at all, so you can do this at a really kind of hands-off participation. But I think the intent is what's needed, and the awareness, of course.
So in respect to the labyrinths that are out there, some are in disuse, some are not, some are in funky places. Does ritual and ceremony, consistent ritual and ceremony, which I know you do with your Prairie Labyrinth, you've got the chakra angels and the chimes, and I'm assuming that each chime is calibrated to a key, a tone. Consistent with the chakra. So it increases this energetic potential and potency, does it not? I mean, it does not help. Does not help.
Yep. Yes, and I think that when we're talking about labyrinths that, let's say, were built and no one ever uses them, or no one's maintaining them. So I have felt like this from the beginning, because I called myself the keeper of the Prairie Labyrinth, because even though I was instrumental, it was one other person besides me that was installing it, that was laying it out. But I feel like my main role was maintaining it. And because I have to maintain this labyrinth by cutting the grasses, and I'm not talking about the lawnmower, I'm talking about the grasses that fall into the path. I have to trim those back. Especially this time of year when the grasses get high. That is a way of energetically infusing the path, the whole idea of it. It's like I'm adding my energy in doing that, where other people don't have as much maintenance on their labyrinth, and they did that intentionally so that it wouldn't be something they had to maintain all the time. But walking it is infusing it. So if you have a labyrinth that's been sitting there and no one's walking it, it's like you've got an airport sitting there. Okay, it's sitting there. There's no planes flying in or out. There's nothing that is going into the self tower and activating that, but it's still there. It's still plugged in, to the larger system. So I feel like even those that are laying there dormant, so to speak, they are, they're there. They're available if anyone stumbles across them. And even though they might be in an area where no humans are using them, we have no idea if spirits are using them, if they're finding their way to those and saying, this is an off-ramp, let's go, let's leave. And yes, your off-ramp is going to be a lot more visible in the invisible realms if it's used, if it's energized by your care and your concern and your own walking, because again, there's an entrainment. So it's not that everybody needs to go out and do rituals on your labyrinth, because your ritual is whatever you decide, and walking is the best ritual. Just plain walk it, with your own issues, with your own, way of being, with your own prayerful intent, that energizes it. And I think the more a labyrinth is used, the more visible it will be in the invisible realms. It's like a brighter light that's going to show up and draw in more. So that's just part of it. I think using it is the ritual.
So let's talk about your workshop a little bit here. It's already 11:48. Can you stay on a little bit longer, just because I have some more questions? We don't have anyone also on the call with us right now, so I don't have to take some time for questions and answers. So let's just keep going. Your workshop, you're going to be using the labyrinth as a light portal, a 5D column of light to allow earthbound souls to go into the light and continue their soul journeys. So how are you going to do this in the amount of time that you have? Just exactly what you were talking about, I guess. So,
right. So the way that and I won't really know that until I get there, because of just the way things are, the flow of workshops, the way we know it. I do want to present the material first, and whatever time we have left, if we have time, if we're put in a room where there is a labyrinth, we will walk the labyrinth with each person having the intent of their own loved ones, of things, of individuals that might come to their mind, whether they have died recently or died a long time ago. If they pop up in their mind, it's something to pay attention to. But it also can be, we don't have anybody in particular in mind, but we are, as a group, going to have the collective intent that whatever souls are drawn to this particular time and place in Loyola, that we're going to walk with the intent when we get to the center, we're opening up the portal and they're going. So if we do not have time for the whole group to walk, I recently have done this workshop with a paranormal group. And in doing that, I had a large slide up for the PowerPoint presentation of the chakra labyrinth. And we just did it, everybody sitting in their seats, where I talked us through each of those chakras and with the spirits that we knew were already collecting. And the same will be true for this, because this workshop, and I'm talking about the entire gathering of the Labyrinth Society coming together, we're already putting out an energetic call. It's already going out. And as it builds closer to the day, it's calling in souls saying, if you are ready to cross over, there's going to be a large number of energy put into that releasing you. So whether I have time to have people physically walk the labyrinth in that way, it doesn't matter. And if they're sitting in the chairs, it might just be that we'll do it collectively, but we will be releasing souls as a collective.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You're a founding member of the Labyrinth Society, the first Energy Keeper chair. I have listened to watched the video of your interview, but can you just share a little bit for those who haven't, a little bit about how this Energy Keeper role came into being during those early board meetings and conferences?
Well, it all came into being at the very first, at the inception point in 1998 in St. Louis, when we were trying to decide the different groups to break into as far as what was going to be needed for board positions, but it was also committees that we were working on, trying to form the different things. And I did not understand what was going on. I had a total different, concept of why I was even there. I thought I was coming to a conference, and I was going to get to participate with other individuals that were all doing labyrinth work. And that's not what it was at all. Yes, they were there and they all had been working with labyrinths, but it wasn't to share what they were discovering. It was to create the Labyrinth Society. And it was out of just probably frustration of seeing those things on that pad that Helen was writing down the different committees, that when she had 12 different things listed and every one of them was an area that I knew nothing about and I didn't really feel that I could contribute to, it was just plain out of frustration that I made the comment to Carol Comstock, who I didn't know at the time, and just said, there's nothing up there that I can even do. I'm not going to be good in making bylaws and writing a mission statement and all of the other things that were up there. And she said, me neither. This is really intimidating. I wish there was something that we could contribute. And I said, yeah, why don't they have anything to do with energy? And so Carol started laughing and said, yeah, how would you word that? And I said, I don't know, we'll put down energy keepers. And it was a dare. She dared me to go up and write that onto the board, and I thought, yeah, I'll go do that. And we really just looked at it as a joke that wouldn't even get noticed. It's way down at the bottom of the list. No one's going to read that. And instead, Helen noticed it right away when she came back and said, what is this number 13 Energy Keepers and who put that up there? And I felt like, oh boy, I'm on the spot now. I have to make up something off the top of my head. And that's really what I did. I just said, I said the thing about there's nothing here that we can contribute to. And it seems to me that if we have all of you breaking into groups and trying to get down into these areas that are difficult. These weren't easy things to be plodding through. I said, it seems to me somebody should be out there walking a labyrinth while we do this. And, you know, I think that the attitude was, you guys just want to get out of work. And I thought, yep, absolutely. I do not want to do any of that stuff over there. And when she said how many others feel like that, there was 6 of us that raised our hand. And in that moment, it was like agreement. All right, fine. You know, go and walk a labyrinth. And it was, and Helen did kind of flesh it out a little bit, saying, well, if this was a board position, really, what would you be doing? And again, I was totally making it up, you know, thinking at that time, 1998, people had email. We were all using email. I said, I don't know, we could keep connected with each other through email. We could, you know, send out different things of different needs of what was going on. So it really was totally off the top of my head that this was happening. And in a way, I felt like, what the heck just happened that I'm on a board position, and when I was the one that wanted nothing to do with being on a board, you know, in that traditional sense. And here I was as a board member. And I think over the years, it just evolved. It evolved as we went. You know, and I could definitely see in being in these board meetings for 6 years, yes, and energy was a component we all needed, you know, because we could get off track really easily or get frustrated or whatever. So it was always good to come back and be reminded, okay, how do we come back to balancing the energy? You know, and I think that's what the role turned into. And I'm very grateful for all of those that stepped up after me that are doing it, and Sarah, who is now fantastic in doing it. So I think we've had really quality people doing energy keepers, you know, from the very beginning. And I see the vitalness of the role now. In the beginning, I felt like, yep, I want to get out of work. Yep, get me out of here. You know, it didn't get me out of any work. It just rearranged it.
But I think that I know for me being on the board, and I hear you about not understanding why you're there and a board position. Oh my God, really? No. But having the energy keeper chair, create space, a sacred space for us at the beginning of our board meetings and close it at the end is hugely important. And I have stepped in a number of times to do this when the energy keeper chair wasn't there. And it's just, it just sets the tone. It reminds us of what we're doing all this for. And it reminds us that there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger, the involvement is bigger. The outcome is bigger. It's deeper. It's, you know, it's multi-layered. And absolutely. And so I can't even imagine the pod structure, the board of directors, the governing board of this organization without this, because it's such a connecting piece. From the left, you know, the left brain, do everything goal oriented, get it all done, and the energy of the labyrinth itself.
And I really feel like that was an outgrowth out of the group that were gathered as those founding members. We were such a diverse group to begin with. I mean, there was 40 people in that room, close to 44, you know, that were all sitting in there. And there were, I think, one of the agreements that was made in that beginning, hashing it all out, was this is going to be a circle full group. It isn't, you know, the typical hierarchy where you think of at a square table. It was at a round table, and it felt like that equality that was happening. And because we were trying to be cognizant of the diversity and inclusion of each part, I think it's why when I brought it up that it was not knocked down. When it was like, okay, you know, we hear what you're saying. This needs to be included instead of excluded, like there's no room in a board, you know, meeting. And in traditional board meetings, it wouldn't have ever been considered. But because we were coming and approaching this from a different place to begin with, I think, to the credit of all of those people that were there, they could see this, even though we didn't have it fleshed out. We didn't know what this was going to be, but it was right from the beginning. It went into exactly what you're talking about, as far as opening up the board meetings, closing the board meetings. Energy was always a part of that. Let's set the energy, let's release the energy. And when we got off track, which happened a lot during the board meetings, we would have to, pull it back in and come back into that energetic structure again of going, let's remember why we're doing this. So it ended up being crucial, but who knew when it started out just being, I'm being rebellious. So it kind of bypassed that. Yeah.
So in terms of TLS, you mentioned the energy keepers and how pleased you are with how it's progressed. What do you think how TLS has grown and the direction it has taken?
Well, I think that it's taken a good direction, but I also feel like who knew it at that, again, 20 years ago, where this would go. I think in some respects that there would have been an anticipation, especially maybe, let's say, the year 2000 or even 1999, when we were doing those very first gatherings that were actually gatherings. I think that we had anticipation. Oh, this is going to grow so fast. This is going to go like wildfire. This is going to catch on, and we're going to just do these leaps and bounds growing. And it didn't happen like that. It really did not happen like that. And so we could look at that and go, did we fail? Did we, and I don't think so. I think it was always meant to be a grassroots movement, to be exactly what I'm talking about, the self towers, that quietly they've been spreading all over the world. And the Labyrinth Society is a big part of that, because when we started out in 1998, and you would say the word or you'd try to explain this to others, it was educating at that very root level. They didn't have a clue what this was. And I think it was sort of in that time, it probably was 1998, when I had already had my labyrinth for 3 years. And we are doing prairie burns, which means that whole grass is all being burned off of it. So that is the only time, and we only do that every 2 years, so that's the only time the entire pattern of the labyrinth is exposed, where you really see that, very plainly. And in that year, 1998, I was in the yard raking after the burns at some point, and a man stopped by, and he was a Southern Baptist minister. He was sent from town, the little town closest to me, where they were having a town meeting in a restaurant of concerned citizens because of seeing what was revealed in this field. That I remember the day after the burn having a lineup of pickup trucks all the way down my road thinking, what is going on out there? Well, they were all parked looking at the labyrinth, trying to figure this out. And his concern was that he had to go back and report to everybody in the restaurant, does this have anything to do with astrology? Does this have anything to do with devil worship? That was their two big things, and I said, it doesn't have anything to do with either one. And would you like to walk in and I can talk to you? And I was using deliberately words like it's a walking prayer, but it was, he was not hearing everything I was saying, lots of different religions, it's non-denominational. He wasn't hearing any of that. All he was hearing is it devil worship? Is this a crop circle? Because in their minds, crop circles are devil worship, and a crop circle just appeared in this field. That was their interpretation of it. He had to go back to that group and calm them all down so they didn't come out and lynch me, that was happening. And that was 1998. And look at the stretch of where we've come from and where we've come to as far as the education. That most people, when they hear the word now, they aren't cocking their heads and making those assumptions. This is something evil. This is something, get this away from us. This is totally against Christianity. That was all their assumptions. What pagan rituals are happening out here? So it's a matter of going, I think that education piece has definitely happened. And I think that was the main thrust of the Labyrinth Society. Let's, contribute. Let's educate people. Let's bring this forward so that it is going out and multiplying. And I think recently, I believe I read that Jeff on the Labyrinth Locator is saying there's 5,500 labyrinths that are now entered on that location across the world. And I felt like I read somewhere else that it's more like close to 10,000 labyrinths that are really out there, because there's so many. I know that in my area in Kansas City, I know that, there's maybe 2 that are registered on the locator, and there's 20 others that are in the area that are not on that locator. And I think that's true worldwide. So the Labyrinth Society has served its purpose more than it knows, because in all these subtle different ways, there's people going out worldwide building labyrinths, putting these self towers in place. And it is doing something energetically, whether we can see it or whether we have big, huge groups who are attending the gathering. That doesn't matter, because the communication, I think, is the biggest leap that's happened with the society. As far as the word is getting out, and it's getting out in all kinds of ways, and that inclusivity is happening, where, and from my perspective, there's more and more earthbound souls becoming aware that there's a way to up-level and go to the higher vibration of where they're really intended to go. And that alone, having their energy released from the planet, is, to me, the difference of a hot air balloon with sandbags on it. It is, the more sandbags we can cut and release, the balloon can fly. And the balloon is the earth herself. It is the earth trying to move into 4th density, and the old 3 density or 3rd dimensional energy that got stuck from lifetimes of that pile up that's happening, we are all contributing in that release of that energy by just walking our labyrinths. So that's my vision of it, or the way I interpret it.
So really, this is a call to the global labyrinth community to help with this graduation process. You describe it as a graduation process. So what would you say? What are the key in terms of, recognizing yourselves as light workers, recognizing that labyrinths are rainbow bridges, and actively inviting earthbound souls to graduate whenever you walk, no matter, is that accurate?
Right. That's exactly what it is. It's like I'm saying, we are the choir. We are the ones who are drawn to labyrinths, who walk labyrinths, who build labyrinths. Just enter this into your consciousness in the same way that we have all been obsessed with the idea of labyrinths, and we don't really even know, where's that obsession coming from? Why am I driven to do this? Well, I'm answering it for myself, saying this explains that unknown, piece for me. Why was I pulled into this in the first place? It's because this is part of the contribution that I believe anybody who has a pull toward labyrinths is a grid worker. Whether you think of yourself as a grid worker or not, but you are here helping build the new grid that is launching all of us into the new earth, that higher vibration. And we all contributed to be part of those builders. So that's why I'm using that word soul bridge. Are you willing to be a soul bridge? Are you willing to help by just lending your energy? And all it is your consciousness. To know I'm walking the labyrinth, but as I do it, I'm stirring energy, And I'm making that available to any other souls who may or may not be there, but just stirring it in that way allows for that to come forward. So I think it's a permission given thing. They can't do it without our permission and without our awareness or consciousness of it. So that's really what we're asking of the Labyrinth community. Just be conscious of it. Be aware that you can provide this service without it really interfering too much with your personal walk or with anything else that how you're using the labyrinth already. You know, that you can be a huge contributing factor to the upliftment of this planet.
So, any tips on how the Labyrinth Society in particular might help this process over the next 5 years or so? We're creating a 5-year strategic initiative plan, and
Yeah.
this should be an aspect of it, don't you think?
Yes, I definitely think it should. And that's one of the reasons why I was most drawn to be a presenter this conference, is because, okay, I've been doing this quietly. I've been doing it internally, but I have not really openly talked about it to this degree with the Labyrinth Society. You know, so even though I feel like it was in the very beginning, there was a component of this, you know, when I was a speaker in 2002, but it has been fleshed out much bigger. And so making it, as we go further ahead, to consciously know we are those nodes. The labyrinths are nodes on the planet, and it is helping with that crystalline grid that is, whether we say upper world, lower world, or middle world, it's all around us, because the labyrinths are right here in middle world, and we're utilizing them and energizing them. So it's a way to just be conscious about it and kind of to put it onto that 5-year initiative to say, yeah, it's heating up, especially when you're naming 5 years. We are in a window of time of mass acceleration where the frequency is going higher and higher and higher. And this is a way that each of us individually can lend our energy to what's going on, especially at times when you feel hopeless and helpless to contribute anything, when it looks like, you know, we're all going to hell in a handbasket. You know, that's not the case. That's just the illusion of the disillusion that has to happen. You know, it's got to be this level of disruption that's taking place, because something is being birthed, and we're part of that birthing process.
Yeah,
so I think acknowledging it is where we got to start.
It's what you do with your labyrinth every 2 years. You have to burn away the grasses for the new grasses to come through, and to clean out the old detritus, which is the Kali energy, the Kali Lilith energy, what you're talking about. Yeah. So this is what we're in right now. We're in that process. I read someone where we're all refugees migrating from the past age to the next age, from the the Piscean age to the Aquarian age.
Aquarian age. Yep. And it makes sense that we're seeing that out picture in real refugees trying to leave countries that no longer, you know, can serve what they need. So it makes sense. We feel that upheaval that's happening. So again, the labyrinths are serving as these ports of calm, you know, that souls can start migrating into. And it is our own port of authority. It is our own port. It's giving that authority to say, I will lend my energy to this. This isn't just what's happening on the 3D level. We're preparing where we're all going. And I think that's why the labyrinth, I think it's why it even came into being in the first place. When we go back to the ancient times and go, what the heck were they doing? What did they know that we didn't know? But I feel like it's always been part of the grid system, and it's been providing a level of stabilization to the planet from the very beginning. And it had to keep growing out, and into our consciousness to be where it is right now, that we can be on board and contribute to this in a real active way.
Wow, Toby, thank you so much. We've gone about 15 minutes over, and I don't want to take any more of your time. This has been fabulous, brilliant episode, and I think everyone who walks labyrinths and is drawn to them should listen to this. It's really been a pleasure sharing this hour and 15 minutes with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to have someone who understands this and can converse about it, because not everyone is on that page. So I feel really just uplifted by you being there, holding this other end and being willing to get this out to people. You know, that's what's needed. You're doing your part in a big way.
Well, thank you, and there are many of us on the board of Labyrinth Society members, and so many more people out there in all of our communities. All of us are actively engaged, and I think through these kinds of episodes, these podcasts, it helps to connect people. You know, oh, there are other people who are doing this. There are other people that
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I mean, it's taking it out of what I would say, especially in the early days, there was a mindset that I had too, that I'm doing something woo-woo and I need to keep it under wraps. You know, like, okay, that's not going to be accepted by everyone. But I feel like that's part of, back to me changing the labyrinth to align with the chakras. It's time for the energy to go out. It's time for us not to be hiding anymore. It's time for us to express, because it's what's inside of each other's hearts, and it's an inside knowing. So it's time for us to talk about it and, you know, co-create at a higher level, where we're all consciously joining our energies to make what this is really unfold, because we don't know. We're being surprised as we do it. So this is wonderful to be in the mystery and to be aligned with the mystery, and to know that there is that flow, you know, just there's a bigger flow that we're all joined into, you know. So it is that whole piece of the song that I was saying to you, you know. So it's when you just let go, you know, they return, you know, to the endless flow that runs through you eternally. That's what we're doing. We're contributing at that higher level. Yeah.
Well, I hope you share that song at gathering at some point or another. That would be really brilliant. Somehow or another.
I might consider that, where I wouldn't have thought of doing that, but I might definitely consider that as part of the presentation.
Okay, Toby, thank you so much, and many continued blessings on your path.
Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing you in October.
Yes.
So okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Toby. Thank you. So you've been listening to Labyrinth Society's Many Paths, Many Visions on GoToMeeting and broadcast by Spreaker with your host, Christiana Britton. Be sure to check the Labyrinth Society website, media area, Facebook page, Global Group, YouTube, and Google Plus for a list of upcoming dates and guests. Also, if this podcast has piqued your interest in the Labyrinth Society and you'd like more information about membership, please go to www.labyrinthsociety.org/membership. Ciao, namaste, and may you find what you need on your path through life.